Hello, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for all the social media feeds to go live as we go live with Beanstalk Global and AHDB with their fantastic Isaac and our fantastic guest speaker today, Rex. And we're just waiting, as I say, for the social media to go live. Rex, we'll go into more detail with. I'm going to call you, Rex, one of the a real expert in real estate investments, and so we'll come on to some of the major projects that you've been working on. Rex, there's a really interesting conference that Isaac and I went to a couple of weeks ago called the Oxford Farming Conference that was held in Kelso-Pries, Oxford, and there was a great speaker in the morning. Isaac, I don't know if you remember her name, Wednesday morning, and she was talking about the amount of energy consumption by countries, and she was basing it on the amount of resources that countries use based on 365 days, and that how many countries could get to 365 days and just use their own resources to get through the year. And what piqued my interest about that conversation was yesterday we were talking to an amazing business in the UAE that's growing fresh food that we're helping with on a recruitment perspective. But our HR contact was saying how she thought it was a bit immoral that in the likes of Dubai, that they in the summer it's like 50 degrees and really humid. But they have air conditioning everywhere. So yeah, got that. But also they have air conditioning outside in the restaurants, Rex. So you could be sat outside in Dubai, 50 degrees, and you've got air conditioning thumping down at you, and sort of the sustainability footprint on that and how ridiculous that is. But just go back to this speaker from the Oxford Farming Conference. So she was saying about how countries, she basically asked what countries can get through the whole year using their own resources. Isaac, can you remember which country was near at the top of using its own? So it's Jamaica got to 360 days in a year of using their own resources, and I didn't think that would be Jamaica. And again, my bad French, Kelso-Pries, the country that was worse was Qatar. They only got through 6 days of the year, and that might be on the back of the World Cup. But it's just this oxymoron about everything we're trying to do in the respect of environmentally and trying to save the planet, but also we've got to be in buildings. And I suppose, Isaac, that's one reason that we wanted to bring Rex on. Isaac, introduce Rex, please, because we're all green lights on the social media.
Yeah, so we'll get on to a moment. A good friend of mine, Rex. We'll be talking about some, and how they go about deciding and doing long-term projects. So really excited to have Rex. I'm Isaac van Heerden. I work for AHDB. We're a levy-funded organization working on behalf of farmers. We do research. We provide market analysis and intelligence. We do farmer-to-farmer knowledge exchange. We look at consumer trends. We currently got something running called the We Eat Balance campaign in supermarkets, in newspapers, on television, video on demand. This month, for instance, we've got 200 teachers booked into 2 conferences in Edinburgh and London, getting teachers to understand the We Eat Balance and food a fact of life, but better, and so they can go back into their schools to give that to some of their students. This thing that I lead on for AHDB specifically is something called AgriLeader. And as part of that, we really believe to run successful businesses, you've got to be able to lead yourself, lead your people, but also lead your business, which is what today is all about. And we've got some Rex from outside of the industry that will share some of his ideas on that 3 topics of leading self, leading business, and leading people. And just a quick plug, we've got our flagship event, the AgriLeader Forum, on the 7th and 8th of February. So if you're interested in that, if you're a farmer or working in a levy-paying business, get in contact. And we're really looking forward. We've got an awesome lineup for that. But that's enough. I'll get Rex on screen.
Guys, I'm laughing because I just had a WhatsApp message saying, Isaac, we love your stately home. What's its name?
Tudor Barn.
Tudor Barn, and actually that segues quite well into Rex. Rex, tell us where you are. And tell us what's behind you through your window, because I love your description in our green room earlier. Rex, where are you?
Yeah, well, I'm smack bang pretty much in the centre of the city of London, just on top of Leadenhall Market, where just over my shoulder you can probably see some pretty substantial steelwork going up on one of our latest development schemes called One Leadenhall. It's quite a substantial tower building of about 440,000 square feet, which we've already done a major deal to a big law firm called Latham & Watkins, who are going to predominantly occupy it. It's an incredible site which leans, it literally sits on top of Leadenhall Market, which as a historical sort of landmark in the city is fairly spectacular. A lot of people recognise it as Dear Gone Alley in the Harry Potter series. So we have a lot of very excited Japanese who like to come and visit, who apparently like Harry Potter a lot. So it's a great place to be. And I suppose without getting into the weeds of how things are done, it's a challenge that as a developer we have to confront fairly head on, which is sort of marrying the new build with the history that we're building into, if you like.
Yeah, and Rex, I think that's one of the reasons why it was inspired by Isaac and his colleagues at AHDB to bring you on, because there's a lot of similarity in respect of farms. Because you look at a number of farms, you were joking about Isaac's house, Tudor House, but there's a number of farms that have got long history. I know of one farm that is. One of the farm buildings is virtually fully moated, but they wanted to put down a new grain store, and all of the planning elements and constraints to keep everything in keeping. Again, that's why we were really keen to get you on, because we think there's a lot of synergy. Rex, just for the people live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, I forgot one, and on the podcast, I just want to give a bit of a more depth background on yourself, so that people can also research you whilst we're talking or offline. So it's great to have Rex of Brookfield Properties on board, and we're going to be talking about future-proof thinking, predictions, and adaptation. And if we want to find anyone to tell us about that within the real estate world, it's going to be Rex. Rex, I love your profile. Your profile describes you online as mind open, always learning, design-driven, relationship builder, deal doer, not forgetting the bits in between, which I'm appalling at. Brookfield is an amazing enabler as a business, sleeves rolled up and always ready to go. Brookfield Properties develops and operates real estate investments on behalf of Brookfield Asset Management, one of the largest alternative asset managers in the world. From office to retail, logistics to multifamily, and hospitality to development, they work across sectors to bring high quality, sustainable real estate to life around the globe every day. Rex has worked on some of London's most iconic buildings, including the Gherkin, Heron Tower, and the Olympic legacy at Stratford, to promote both functionality in design and placemaking. And Rex, over and above that, I hear you're a bit of a cyclist as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to quite confess to being a mammal just yet, only because I'm still trying to pretend I'm not middle-aged. But definitely.
Show off to us. Tell us about this, the L2B. L2B. Tell us all about that, please.
London to Brighton.
Oh, well done.
Oh, London to Brighton. Oh, yeah. London to Brighton was, well, I did the Étape earlier in the year, which is a horrible ride, which actually mirrors the Queen stage of the Tour de France every year. And I thought London to Brighton as a charitable endeavour following that probably wasn't long enough, so I did the London to Brighton and then cycled home, so sort of doubled the distance basically.
And presumably you trade extensively to do London to Brighton, because it's quite an arduous for our international listeners. What is it? I think it's 60 miles, 70 miles. So, and there's ditch the week, which is the
Tour de France thing that you did, and Rex. That were how long was that?
Yeah, that was probably London to Brighton was like a family day out really compared to the Étape. Which is climbing some of the sort of really iconic alpine climbs in the south of France. So things like Alpe d'Huez, which is where we finished, the Galabier and the Croix de Fer. So yeah, some pretty horrible climbs.
Okay, so are you, Rex? Are you one of those annoying people that are just naturally?
No, I have to work a bit hard at it. But yeah, I think it's all part of the personal challenge, though. I think I'm probably intrinsically quite lazy. So unless I have something fearsome in the diary, it doesn't motivate me. So I've always got to have something horrible to motivate me.
So come on. What's in the diary? What's in the diary for 2023 or 2024? What are you aiming at?
Well, this year I'll be doing a 225-kilometre race in Mallorca at the end of April. So I'm trying to prepare for that one at the moment.
And help me on foot, running, bicycle,
on a bike.
Thank the Lord. Okay, and if you send the invite to Isaac and us, I suspect you might get an out of office on that one.
Yeah, well,
okay.
I was going to say we'll be doing that one in a day. Isaac might do that in 3 or 4.
Yeah. Well, weeks.
Wow. Okay.
Months.
So come on, let's get to your day job, because we've got to find out before you keel over on one of your mad bike rides. So we've got a bit of a summary as to what you do, but just help us. What do you actually do? Give us your. I know there's not such a thing, especially in our mad times. What's your average day? What's your average week? Rex? What do you do?
I mean, well, I was clearly being thoroughly enthusiastic when I wrote my LinkedIn profile, but I mean, I suppose my title, if you like, is a director of leasing, and I sort of look after. I suppose the cradle to grave, along with obviously a lot of other very expert teams of the life cycle of a building, if you like. So, for example, I will give advice to our in-house teams on the schemes that we're looking to purchase, and there are various sort of funds and drivers behind what those purchases may or may not be. So we will give sort of market-facing advice. So I'm, if you like, at the coalface of the occupational market in the City of London. Yeah. I understand what occupiers and businesses are looking for in real estate, and then that feeds into our acquisition strategy, which then feeds into our design. So if we're doing a ground-up development or a major refurbishment of a building, I will look at what we need to deliver in order to make it competitive and a prime asset once it's delivered into that marketplace. Yeah. I will then liaise with businesses to lease space to businesses within those buildings that we've bought and delivered, either on a pre-let, which is prior to completion, which is what we've done behind us here, or sort of any immediate vacancies that come up as businesses churn through our portfolio. We then, our relationships with our occupiers are pretty critical to us, because so even on a 10-year cycle, the chances of the same team being in position from day 1 to day 10 are relatively low.
Wow,
so,
good point.
So the communication that we have has to be regular to pick up any changes in personnel, in order to make sure that those relationships are relevant. I suppose it's things like, if you have an annual review, in my opinion, that's sort of like 364 days too late. You should be having them every other day. You need to be, or where appropriate, maybe every 3 or 4 weeks, or a month, or 6 months. But certainly, if you're going to leave it too long, you're going to be in trouble. So those relationships are really, really key. We will then liaise with our various fund teams on the sell side to make sure that we're positioning the asset so that it's performing properly and giving the returns back to the fund, and then identifying the appropriate moment to sell and then redeploy capital.
Yeah. From what you've just described, Rex, and from the bit that I know of you, so that is exactly why, so I've asked you to come on this, it's needing that long-term view, it's such a complex thing, and continuously changing. How do you keep it relevant? A building is quite a fixed thing, but you need to be able to be adaptable enough to serve the end customer, even if that end user might change or that. So how do you keep it, adaptable enough while it's something that's relatively fixed?
It's really hard. And I mean, just to give you an example of those kind of timelines, the Leadenhall behind me here, we bought that in 2013. Okay, and it's just coming out of the ground now, and due for completion in 2025. So there's 12 years straight away.
Wow.
It was occupied for the first 4 of those years. So that gave us time to understand what we wanted to try and deliver, try and secure a planning. So actually we got a planning permission in 2016, then we revised that in 2019, agreed a pre-let in 2020, and now we're building it. So trying to keep it relevant is really hard. I mean, especially in an age where things move incredibly quickly. And I would say that the fastest moving piece of the puzzle is the environmental and sustainability piece. So again, Leadenhall here, and the majority of the buildings in the city are run gas-fired boilers, for example. Now, those aren't very popular. Plus the impact that the Ukrainian crisis sort of triggered at the beginning of the year, where gas prices suddenly escalated. You're also looking down the barrel of, can you even procure gas? It sort of forces not only the environmental, but just the whole financial model into a bit of jeopardy. So suddenly you're looking at, okay, I've just dug a big hole. I've poured in a couple of thousand tons of concrete, and now I've got to try and see whether or not I can change the main plant of this building from from gas to electric. So, unfortunately, in this case here, we weren't able to make that change. So there are some things that you just cannot change. So you say, okay, well, if we can't change that, what can we do instead? Part of Brookfield, the wider Brookfield piece, is, I think we're one of the largest private owners of wind farms in the world. So we are lucky enough to be able to source a lot of our energy for our portfolio from renewable energy.
Yeah.
Okay. And whilst we would have normally funded that in through an electric boiler, okay, we are still going to have to buy gas, but the offset that we can make from our renewable program gets us as far as we possibly can with our environmental credentials in the building.
Yeah, and Rex, in some Rex, in some respects, you've got to be a futurist, haven't you? That when you started the build of the example of the likes of the one behind you, you obviously didn't have an idea about the Ukrainian war. You didn't have any idea about the pandemic. But the thing is physically building, and you've got to. So that must be. There's just so many moving parts in that.
Yeah, so things like that, you can say, okay, well, we can't deal. We just can't deal with that. But what else can we do? So you're always looking for other things. So a lot of the sustainability piece, it's not hugely well known, but should be, in my view, because is the fact that the way that offices are often delivered in what we call a Cat A condition, which means that you have a floor built in, and all the air conditioning and sort of ductwork and lighting pre-installed on the floor. Yeah. Often when an occupier comes in, a lot of that gets ripped out and just put in a skip, because the way everybody occupies an office slightly differently, which is mind-boggling. Okay, so what we do now at Brookfield is we deliver space where we can in what we call a sort of a shell condition, which means that we don't have any of that on-floor plant for air conditioning in situ at the time. Yeah. And we offer a contribution and obviously some technical advice on how to deliver the combination of that on-floor plant plus how a tenant occupies, so they're fit out, if you like.
Yeah.
In order to eradicate waste and again improve the carbon load of the building.
So Rex, and I was at the meeting yesterday, and I had Kevin Cox, chair of the RSPB, there with a group of dairy farmers, and there was a big intensive discussion around the environment. Where does that responsibility lie? Is it at the primary producer? Is it the end consumer? The supply chain? And so where and how much of each of that responsibility lies with each of those parts? Do you get a lot of pressure from your end customer on that, and does that affect in how you build and how you rent different spaces because of the end user?
Yeah, I think actually businesses who, obviously in the city core here and across the UK, the variety of businesses are so huge. Everything from the financial guys who need high density for trading, through to lawyers who want heavily boxed up floor space, through to tech guys who want really funky fit outs. Again, they are not property experts, right? They want to try and spend as little time procuring their office and then delivering the fit out to suit their style of occupation as possible. So I think whether we like it or not, quite a lot of the responsibility probably has to land with the landlord whose core business it is to deliver space. We recognise that. We don't always like that, but I think we recognise that from an environmental point of view, bearing in mind we're the guys pouring the concrete and delivering the building and how it will perform going forward, we have to take on quite a bit of that responsibility ourselves. To your point about what are occupiers expecting, they're looking for somebody to tick all the boxes for them. So they will expect a building to have a certain set of environmental credentials, and I could bore you to tears with how many there are. The EPC is probably the easiest to understand, which we have in a domestic capacity anyway in the Energy Performance Certificate. But we also have things like GRESB, which is the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmarking, and all these other things. I won't bore you with them all. But these are all targets that we as an industry are trying to hit and meet. Where the onus does come on slightly more onto the occupier is, we as an industry or as a landlord can deliver a sort of as carbon neutral a building as possible. But when it comes to how that is operated, is very much a collaboration with the occupier, because they're the guys that are in there, they're the guys that are using the electricity, etc. So delivering the product is very much on our shoulders, but enabling that collaboration to happen with our occupiers is pretty key, and there is a role to play for those occupiers.
And just moving the conversation on a bit. So you obviously Brookfield Properties and the building side of it, but ultimately it's part of Brookfield Asset Management. So how do those two work together? But also how do you decide, or how does the asset management decide on what will be a good project to invest in, and where should you stay clear of? How do you work that? Because ultimately you've got some shareholders that will demand that you have a good return. So how does that all work?
Yeah, I mean that's a really complicated question, but I suppose, BAM, it's got 750 billion under management across the globe. I mean, it's massive, and I've sort of alluded to the fact that it has, we own wind farms, but we also own hydroelectric dams. We own residential, student housing, logistics. We've got a private equity piece. Centre Parks is a name that people know that might not realise that we actually own. So anything with sort of a bit of a property background that we can utilise is what we look at. And there is competition even within the portfolio companies of BAM for the access to the cash that they generate in certain funds. So I suppose to try and answer your question, we have various different fund types, if you like, depending on what sort of risk profile is being or performance is being delivered under that fund. So you might have a core fund which tends to be lower risk, which tends to have some pre-existing income in it, or you might go for a core plus, which is like a bit more of an active management play. So there's like an asset management play in there, or there might be a sort of an opportunity fund where you might try and buy a distressed asset and completely deliver a new scheme. And very often one morphs into the other. So you buy a scheme with one idea in mind, and it actually becomes something else just by dint of of life getting in the way of strategy.
And I guess where I'm heading is, what can farmers learn from that strategy, and how can you simplify that of where can farmers what can they do so that when they're looking at an investment
Yeah.
at very much different scales, but
Well, I
farmers
suppose it,
want capital in heavy investments.
well, I suppose it depends what your appetite to risk is to a certain extent. But also, I think, to the point I made, which was you buy it for one reason, but that doesn't necessarily mean that once you get under the bonnet of that investment, it's going to do what you want it to, or you can push it in the direction that you want it to go. So I think it's probably being a bit agile with it. It's not the end of the world if it doesn't necessarily do what you want it to from day one. You can actually look at it and say, well, look, okay, we've got this now. How best can we make? What else can we do to get the kind of returns that you want? And if you actually stop and think about it hard enough and are prepared to be a bit creative, you can actually find some quite high value opportunities in there. We bought as part of a larger scheme, we bought a series of buildings which we were looking to convert to offices, but it became fairly apparent, after we didn't have to run too much of a rule over it to realise that wasn't going to work. So using that BAM connection again, we managed to segue it into some student housing, and very successful.
Wow.
So I suppose it's just being agile with your assets is maybe the segue.
Rex, I think the energy model is really interesting. There's a large vertical farm that's about to go live in the eastern regions, and the investor there owns a very large offshore turbine unit, and that's going to be advantageous to that vertical farm because the power is going to come in direct when it's not going into the grid. And Rex, you'll know far better than I and Isaac the spread of how much of that power goes into the grid and how much is available. And I'm amazed, naively amazed that's actually within your business model. So that's advantageous to your tenants that you can supply the power. And it's almost like we've gone through this, my word of the phrase of the year last year, societal change, that you've come up with a solution to creating perhaps not cheap energy, but reliable and affordable energy for your tenants. And Isaac, do you think that's something we might see with farmers or farming groups, that they might look to invest in solar parks or wind turbines to give them security of energy? Do you think we might be duplicating Rex's business model even more so?
I think, so obviously a few years ago, there was a lot of investment and farmers going into renewable energies. The terms have slightly changed, but I think it's still a lot of farms see it as a good investment. With feed-in tariffs and the rest, but also I think you're right. And going forward with energy, the instability of supply, that might be something that actually is an added bonus rather than just a pure diversification. It's the stability it could potentially give to your business. So yeah, I think that might be a consideration going forward.
Yeah, Rex, with you being the futurist as we've labelled you, just to give you a scenario within. I guess based on specifically East Anglia where we're based, there's a view that with climate change that farmers in might be this generation, might be the next generation, will be growing different crops because of increased temperatures and increased sunlight. And also there's a shortage of water in the likes of Norfolk. So potato growers might have to stop growing potatoes and grow other things. All of those crops need buildings and infrastructure to store them. If you were a farmer or advising farmers, how would you look to future-proof what they're building now or considering to build 3 years, 5 years out so that they can future-proof those buildings in respect of they might be growing different crops which might need different requirements? Or it's a horny one, Rex. What would your advice be to the farming community on that basis?
I think build as much volume as you can. Build as simply as you can and as modular as you can. And I think we're from an office point of view, if you'd asked me 10 years ago how different can an office really be, to today, the shift is quite dramatic. So that's what we try and tend to deliver is volume. It's things like thinking about where technology might take you, without overcommitting to doing something that you might have to unpick quite badly in the future. So, for example, it's probably quite easy for us to deliver when we build a building, is to extend the lift shaft to the roof, for example. You might think, well, it probably does that anyway, but it doesn't. So you extend it to the roof, and suddenly you have enabled drone delivery to come into a building, right? So, I mean, something is relatively simple and as unobtrusive as that. If they never deliver anything, you haven't really invested in a huge amount more. All you've done really is poured another layer of concrete at the top of your building.
Yeah.
But if and I think, again, unfortunately, things like war actually often help us innovate a lot. By necessity. Drone technology is certainly is having its probably heyday, albeit for unpleasant reasons at the moment. But those are the kind of things we have to look at. Part of that strategy leads into the environmental piece as well, which is things like consolidated deliveries, to try and remove traffic off site. So you have a warehouse a mile outside London that consolidates all the deliveries and then brings them in. So so that you're minimizing the amount of traffic. So I don't know whether consolidated delivery is relevant or might even work, but why not? There must be some kind of cooperative in terms of deliveries that may or may not resonate somewhere.
Yeah, but I've just had a WhatsApp message. The points that Rex says about modular. What about lifespan? Should we be building buildings for a shorter lifespan than we are currently, on the basis that we might have to repurpose them in the future for different crops? So on that modular basis, specifically, Rex, hold our hand. If you set them up so that they can be added to or broken down and repurposed 10, 15, 20 years down the line, is that what you're thinking of on that modular basis and in respect to farming?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. Yeah, I mean, modular is a bit difficult because it's still a relatively new technology, I think. And anything that you can pull apart and put together again, probably by necessity has a slightly shorter shelf life anyway.
Yeah.
Just because, as stuff happens. But accidents happen, things get broken en route. But yeah, absolutely. I still think that we should be looking more longer term. But there are still some amazing materials which can last long term, which are a lot more flexible. Like sort of cross-laminated timber, for example, as opposed to steel. But even steels can be reused. So I mean, there are various schemes now where in the city where steels from demolished buildings are being reused in the new entity in order to try and avoid this idea of getting rid of this embodied carbon or losing embodied carbon.
Yeah.
So recycling and modular build, I think, has to.
And that back to your original point of Diagon Alley there behind you and the building on top of it. How do you? That's always and like Max said, on farms, that's quite often a thorny issue as well. So how do you keep the legacy? How do you keep some of that history and do something that is maybe changing quicker and quicker?
Yeah, it's a real balance, and I think what we feel certainly with Leadenhall Market is that we're almost its guests. So there is already a community there, and we're trying to grow. We're just taking the community up, vertically. We're not trying to sort of usurp it horizontally. I mean, a lot of that is to do with the planners, and there are some incredibly strict rules in order to preserve the history and the feel of the area or a location. None so sort of strict probably than the St Paul's sightlines, for example, which are dotted around. I think there are 7 or 8 spots around London. Primrose Hill is an example where you have to be able to see the dome of St Paul's, and you're not allowed to build into it. And that's actually delivered some amazingly odd-shaped buildings as a result, where where developers have looked to try and maximise their site, but have had to, put in a big angle on their facade in order to preserve those sightlines. So yeah, we're very much the custodians as far as we're concerned. We're not necessarily we're there to sort of try and future-proof the city, because I think we have to evolve, but it is done so very much with where we've come from in mind.
Yeah. So something like the Gherkin, what was it like working on something like that? Did you know right from the start this is going to be quite an iconic thing? And or what were your role in that, and how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of back in the early 2000s, which it's sort of thick end 20 years ago now, isn't it? Really, God help us. It was fascinating because it was one of the very first sort of towers that came up in the city, apart from a couple that were built in the sort of the 70s or 80s, like Tower 42. So it was really visible on the skyline, very iconic. Probably a building where, probably being polite, where perhaps the architect was allowed to design form over function a little bit.
Oh, careful, Rex.
Yeah. I'd probably get strangled. But so as an office, is it the most efficient office building? Probably not. Is it beautiful from the outside? Yes, it is. Yeah. Can you now see it on the horizon? No, you can't. Unfortunately, it's been dwarfed now by what we call the tower cluster, again, where City Corporation has identified an area in the city to build tall buildings outside of that St Paul's sightline envelope. So it was an amazing thing to work on. Because the building curves away at the top, in order to access the top of the building, you had to go up in a lift along the side, vertical lift, and the building curved away from it. So it was a little gangplank, effectively linked the two together. So it was walking the plank with thin air underneath you was a little bit hair raising, but iconic. And you did feel like you were shaping the landscape a bit.
Wow.
And that's actually one of the things that I really like about what we do, is that you don't just get to shape the skyline, but you also get to form the public realm as well. So it's that interaction with the public realm, I think, is really important. 10 years ago, if you said to me in the city, do you want to go and have lunch? You'd probably have to go underground, and it'd be good old-fashioned spit and sawdust. And then if you wanted to have a drink after 9 o'clock in the evening, you went to the West End. Whereas I think the way that occupiers and people like to come into the office and have more than just an office experience, the nightlife, the restaurant life, the leisure industry is absolutely bloomed and sort of flourished in the city as well. So the streetscape's much more interesting. It's so much more green. And again, whenever we develop anything, we always try and deliver into the public realm.
Yeah, I love what you said, Rex, about the likes of Primrose Hill. You got to be able to see St Paul's. A farm friend of mine in Norfolk has just WhatsApped and said up in Norfolk, our sight lines on a good day is 18 telegraph poles. On a bad day, when it's fog, it's 2 telegraph poles. So they don't have that issue with them sightlines. Just explore that element you talked about earlier about consolidation. I don't know if that's still the same, but I remember a quote from, I think it was Times Radio, stating, when they had an expert like yourself on, saying that for every additional £1 billion that's spent online, there's another £750,000 of storage required. And we're definitely seeing that where I'm based in Bury St Edmunds, that we've got these mega sheds being built for companies, whether it be sneaker companies or whether it be for the likes of Homebase. So this building volume element does seem to be so true. Farmers, and Isaac will correct me if not, sometimes not the best at being collaborative. Do you think with this new way of thinking, if we are going to build on volume, if we are going to build modular, that we do have to come together, we do have to collaborate more rather than just being our single entity, to make sure that we are surviving for the future? What do you think, Rex, from a farming perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's sort of, I think this is probably multi-layered. Actually, I think maybe farming needs to, we as an office industry didn't really engage with the public realm or the public at large, if you like. It was sort of an enclosed office serious ecosystem. Whereas actually now I think we are trying to embrace, make buildings more permeable and more accessible. And I wonder actually whether that as a philosophy might not be a bad idea to sort of bring British farming back up the agenda. I mean, it's
not just your first customers, your kind of end customer or the wider public.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, we have. Yeah, absolutely. So we have programs throughout the year where we get schools and all sorts of people into our buildings and try and get them engaged. So across the board, we try and make spaces for community space. So we'll try and enable. So there's a scheme that we're trying to develop just about half a mile away from where I'm sat now, where there is quite a big community, including a student community. There's the Guildhall School of Music is sort of next door, and we're looking at actually how do we deliver as part of this redevelopment, community accessible space, so that we in the building can engage with all the different occupiers. There's a residential piece down there as well. So it's trying to make us more accessible and permeable, really.
Yeah.
Rex, as a working in the city, total outsider's view, what is your thoughts on agriculture? Where do you see the future? Where's the big wins for agriculture from very much an outsider's view?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably hiding our light under a bushel, actually. From an agricultural point of view, I think there's a lot more to be said, and I suppose from a city point of view, I see the restaurants and the offerings that flourish here are the ones that offer the best of British, in my view, okay. And so and source food locally, and I don't think that's probably just a London centric thing. I think you see it more and more. The F&B that flourishes, that's sort of food and beverage, to use a sort of is. I think the ones that really flourish are the ones that embrace locality, and I think that's definitely under tapped.
Excellent, that's good insight. I'm aware we're getting short on time. How can we become better leaders? How do in an industry like yourselves? I'm sure there's a lot of schemes in place and that, but how do we become better leaders of our own business or in a business?
Yeah, I think probably it's a really simple one, and probably one that you've heard before, but it's amazing how bad people are at doing it, and that is listen.
Well done.
Often we sit and we wait for someone else to stop speaking so that we can say something, and I'm sure we've all been there and done it, but listening doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make a decision based purely on what you don't have to agree with that the view, but it should, you need to understand both sides of an argument in order to make, in my view, a valid decision, even if the opposite argument validates yours. And you shouldn't be afraid to be wrong either. And that's why a lot of people don't listen, because they don't want to be proved wrong. So if you can listen and be brave enough to say, do you know what, that's a really good point, you've changed my mind, I think that's incredibly powerful. That's what I would encourage. People are too scared of being wrong.
I think that's a very good point, Max.
It is. I'm learning so much for this. Isaac, can I ask you a question on what we've just learned from Rex?
Say that again, Max.
Can I just ask you a question, Isaac?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put you up as the expert in farming. Tesco, Rex, this will be interesting for you. Tesco had this issue about 5-6 years ago that they had 112 independent pack houses in the UK packing fruit and veg for them in the UK, and they deemed that was obviously too many because there's so much duplication and there's so much profitability held up within the supply chain within agriculture, horticulture, fresh produce. So they wanted to get that 112 down to 12. It comes back to what you were saying, Rex, about building volume and modular. And there's a couple of businesses who actually then went to Tesco and created a collaboration, created alliances to make pack houses, large pack houses that have now proved to be very, very successful and have managed to streamline the supply chain within fresh produce. Isaac, just to use that phraseology again, that there's so much profitability held within the supply chain, and we've got all of these farms doing a lot of the same things. And what Rex was saying about consolidation, do you think this is a route that farmers should go down, whether it be bulk storing their milk, whether it be bulk storing their grain even more so, whether it be bulk storing or processing animals? Do you think we need to see a bit more of a revolution, Isaac, in the terms of that consolidation, that collaboration within agriculture, from what we've learned from Rex?
I think it already happens in places, but I think farming, because of the history and you live and you own quite often, and where and it's such an integral part. Farmers are quite fiercely independent, but we see machinery rings, we see buying groups, where farmers do collaborate, whether that's in discussion groups or business groups, where they collaborate and do things together. They are so much more power there. They draw some of that power back into their own, on their side of the fence. So when they go into negotiations and the rest, that is so powerful for them. So yeah, I definitely think that's a good idea and something that could and should happen more.
Isaac, thank you. Rex, would you ever buy a farm?
Yeah, it depends what kind of farm it was, actually.
Brookfield Asset Management ever buy a farm? I just been asked.
Yeah, well, it depends what it is. It'd probably have to be quite big.
Yes. Yeah, no, again, that's an interesting point. At the Oxford Farming Conference that we were talking about earlier, there was the new proprietors of a large farm, Rex, called Stratford Parker Farms, and they bought, I think it was 12 farms. I can't remember the exact acreage, but we had a great presentation from one of the founders of the business that took it on, that invested, that bought the business. And I asked him if another Stratford Parker Farms came on the market, would you go again? And without hesitation, he said yes. So just out of curiosity, is that something that Brookfield Asset Management has ever looked at in the way of diversifying your portfolio? Would you ever look at land?
Not really. I don't know. I don't think so. No. I mean, we look at land probably as an ancillary to something else, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I don't think agriculture per se is on our agenda.
Yeah.
We're more likely to buy, an asset which we think we can reshape. So, for example, we bought a massive portfolio of shopping centres in America.
Wow.
Which were huge and underutilized, and you can repurpose those into proper big mixed use schemes, as we describe them, rather than just a big shopping centre. So we look to probably repurpose rather than go into an agricultural piece. But you never know. To be fair, actually, we might be in something that I literally have no idea about.
No, it's fine. No, that's the purpose.
You never know.
And Rex, just to put you on the spot, I've got a member of a buying group says, would you sell your renewable electricity to farmers?
I'm sure we probably do somewhere along the line.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. We as I say, we also have for example, we have a hydroelectric dam. I think we got Wales' first hydro. I think is an amazing.
Stop showing off. Yeah. Oh, we own a dam.
So yeah, I think we got a few probably, but we may already do.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm just aware of time.
Go on,
Max.
Isaac.
So, Rex, a couple of final questions for you. What philosophy would you say you live your life by?
I'm a big fan of, it's probably the big religions of the world probably try and co-opt it, but I'm not a particularly spiritual man, but I do believe in what goes around comes around. So yeah, that's probably, karma, I suppose, is perhaps the closest I'd get to a philosophy. Yeah, what goes around comes around, I think.
Excellent. And then if you could tell your younger self anything, what would that be?
What would I say? I would probably say there is never the right time to do anything. So just dive in.
Excellent.
Say yes, take the opportunities as they come, crack on.
Yeah, be curious. Brilliant. Well done. Well done, Rex.
Excellent. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us, Rex.
That's right. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been really good fun. Any farmers that are listening, we're having the AgriLeader Forum on the 7th and 8th of February in Stratford. So please get in touch. And we're really excited about the lineup that we've got for that. And we'll see you, if not there, next time at one of these.
So, and before we go, I've just had a WhatsApp from a farmer, Rex, on North Norfolk. Would you sell him one of your turbines out to sea? Would you sell him a turbine?
Yeah, I'll get it named for him. It's fine. Yeah, so which one he wants, I'll go and fish it out.
So just to wrap up, I think as I said earlier, it's so insightful having the individuals like Rex in, who doesn't ultimately know too much about our sector, but we can learn so much from you. Rex, I've learned so much about you, about future-proofing where we need to build in volume, and we need to be modular, and that whole consolidation element. And it's as Isaac mentioned, it's something that we're perhaps not akin to in respect of the collaboration, but perhaps to be even more successful as a farming sector, we need to promote ourselves more, Rex, as you intimated, and also just look at our internal supply chain system and not be, what do you recognise it, not be too independent, and look to collaborate with our partner farmers, with our neighbouring farmers.
Definitely, we always achieve more together.
Boom, there we go. Isaac, thank you very much. Rex, thank you very much. We look forward to your next big project in London, and hopefully looking going to the very top and getting some great views.
Yeah, come and I'll show you. Come in whenever you like.
Excellent. Thank you, Rex. Thank you, Isaac.
Thanks, Rex.